Hi everyone, this is Mohammed Hassan Salam. I'm back with the second part of XOD database tutorial. In the previous video, we demonstrated only fractions of XOD features in a very basic example with C#. In today's video, as promised, we are going to build a complete application, a tool that you can actually use to organize your daily tasks. We are still in the beginner's level of XOD though. Let's start Visual Studio and create a new project. From the list, select WPF application template. Name the project XOD to do WPF and press enter. As we learned in the previous video, we need to install XOD database. Go to View menu, Other Windows, Package Manager console, type this command, install package XOD-3. XOD gets installed and we are ready to go. Unlike the console application we built in the previous video, this application has a graphical user interface. You know, a window with a text box, list box, and buttons. This is a WPF application, so we're using XAML language to design these visual elements. First, we need to create a component that creates new to-do items. It will consist of a text box to write the title and a button for saving the item. The second component is the list that shows all to-do items we've created. Let's start with the first one. We could add these controls directly into main window file we already have, but as a good practice, we will create a separate custom user control file instead. From project menu, select add user control. Name it add to do item control. This will create two files, add to do item control.xaml for designing the interface using XAML code, and add to do item control.xaml.cs file, which is where we write C# code. We're at the XAML file of the new control right now. To design the interface, you can drag and drop the controls from the toolbox on the design view, or we could do that using XAML code. Using XAML, add these attributes to user control element. Inside the grid element, add a text box for the title. Name it text box to do. The text attribute is for the text we want to display in the text box. Margin attribute equals to 8, 8, 45, 8. This is the space between the text box and the edges of the custom control. It is 8 pixels from the left, top, and bottom, but 45 pixels from the right. Now add the button. Name it button add. The caption of the button will be just add, which we set in content attribute. The first number in margin attribute represents the left side margin of the button, which is 0. But we still see the button attached to the far right of the container. This is because horizontal alignment attribute is equal to right, and because of this, left margin will be ignored, and the button will always be attached to the right side of the container, whatever the dimensions of the container are. Now we need to write the code for saving the items in the database. But before that, let's repeat a piece of code from the previous video. Press Shift, Alt, and C to create a new class file. Name it to-do item. Inside the file, write this. We're creating to-do item class, which is the main object type for the whole application, and it has three properties: ID, title, and done. Now go back to add to-do item control.xaml file. Add click event to the button and select new event handler. Now you have generated an event handler called button add click, which will be executed whenever the user clicks on the button. While the cursor at the handler name, press F12 to go to the actual event handler inside add to do item control.xaml.cs file. Now write this. As you know, the first line creates the connection to XOD database. Then we create a new instance of to-do item class. We take the text from text property of the text box and assign it to title property of the new to-do item object. And then we call db.insert and pass the object to be saved. Of course, we need to add XOD namespace first. Move the cursor to XOD context, then press Alt-Shift-F10 and select using XOD from the menu. Let's improve the code a bit more. Instead of using fx absolute path for the database, let's create a static function that returns the path. Press Shift, Alt, and C to add another class. Name it IO helper, and then create the static function. Get database path, return the path of the executable file into base path variable, add data/todo.zod and then return the combined path. There are two benefits of using this practice in comparison to passing absolute path. First, we are going to make connections to the same database in multiple places in the code. So, by encapsulating the database path in a function and call it instead, prevents you from making typo mistakes and avoid possible connection errors. The second is that we want to put the database in the same application installation folder. For instance, if the installation folder is c/programfiles/zod-todo-wpf, we want the path of the database to be c/programfiles/zod-todo-wpf/data/todo.zod, and we call this a relative path. Now go back to button add_click event handler and replace the absolute path with this function. Press Ctrl, Shift, and S to save everything. Press F6 to compile and build the application assemblies. In main window.xaml file, let's add a new instance of our new control, add to do item control. Now that we have compiled the application, we should see our custom control on the toolbox. Find it and then add it. Local prefix will be added, which refers to the application namespace, and we use it whenever we want to add our local controls like add to do item control. Remove horizontal alignment attribute, and the control will stretch to the whole width of the window. The first part is done. Let's add some design enhancements to main window before we run the application for the first time. Now press F5 to run the application. Write some text in the text box. Click Add. It seems like nothing happened, but the item is actually in the database. On Solution Explorer window, right-click Project Folder. Select Open Folder in File Explorer. Open bin, then Debug. Next to the executable file, we have Data folder, which contains the database. The next part is the list box that shows all created to-do items. Each item on the list has three elements: the title text, the checkbox to set the item as done or undone, and the delete button. Create a new user control. Another way to do it is by right-click on Project Folder on Solution Explorer. Select Add, then User Control. Name this control To-Do Item Control. This control represents a single to-do item on the list. The XAML file is open. Now, add these attributes to the main user control element. In the grid, add a checkbox. The checkbox has content attribute, which we will use to display the title, and isChecked attribute will be used to control done property. We're actually using expressions to bind these attributes to the properties of to-do item type object that we will assign to the control later as a data source. Now press F7 to switch to the to-do item control.xaml.cs file. Data context is a property that exists in every UI control. We can use it to bind data to the control. The data type of this property is plain object. And because we want to bind an object of to-do item type, it will be a lot easier to create a new property that converts data context property to to-do item type. The name of the property will be item, and it will return data context property as to-do item. Press Shift and F7 to switch back to the XAML file. Now we need to add delete button. After we added the checkbox and the delete button, we need some events for the user to interact with those controls. Click event for delete and another for the checkbox. While the cursor at checkbox click event, press F12 to go to its handler. The code in this handler will be executed whenever we check or uncheck the checkbox. Done property of the object bound to this control will take the value from isChecked property of the checkbox. Then we connect to XOD database. Notice we need to add XOD namespace first. Then we call db.update to update the object bound to this control. Let's improve the code. Instead of updating the whole object, it's a good practice in XOD to specify only those properties that you want to be affected by the update operation, like this. Now, only done property will be updated. Create a new function and name it refresh colors. When we check the checkbox, it means that the task is done and the title will be in gray color. Otherwise, it will be in black. We will recall this function when the control gets loaded, so that we get the same effect with the items we read from the database when we open the application. So in XAML view, we will use loaded event in user control element. Now let's work with delete event. Very simple. Connect to the database. And then delete the current object. Now that we have completed the second control, add it to main window file. Now remember, this is going to be a list of to-do items, so we will add a list box element. Margin equals to 0, 42, 0, 0, because we need to push the list box 42 pixels from the top. Inside data template, add an instance of to-do item control. When we load to-do items from the database, we will pass them all as a collection to the list box by code. And by using this data template, we will generate a new instance of to-do item control for each object in the collection. Now we need to write the code that gets the items from the database and feed them to the list box. And that's going to be in loaded event handler of main window. Let's create load data function because we're going to use it more than once. Now run the application, main window is up, and hello XOD item we added earlier is showing up on the list this time. Let's add more tasks. The list box didn't reflect the latest additions even though the items are indeed in the database. Let's fix this. We need to notify the list box with all the changes that happened to the database. In cases like this, we usually use a combination of observer and repository programming patterns. But we're not talking about patterns and best practices. So, out of simplicity, let's do it through basic custom events. In first control, add to-do item control, we will create a custom event that will be triggered every time we add new to-do item. Then we consume the event in main window, where the list box is, and use that to force the list box to reload the data. Open add to-do item control.xaml.cs file, and define a new custom event. We will name it added. Go to button add underscore click handler and then add this line. Raise event, new routed event args, added event. We're basically saying Fire the event added when we finish adding new to-do item to the database. Now open main window.xaml file and go to Add to-do item control element. See, our new added event is on the list. Now call loadData function in this handler. We're almost done. We just need similar custom event for the delete button, which is in our second control, to-do item control. Open the CS file, create another custom event the same way, name it deleted. Go to delete button underscore click handler and fire the event right after we call db.delete. Raise event, new routed event args, deleted event. Now we need to consume deleted event in main window like we did before with the added event. Let's run the application for the last time. Add a new item. Delete hello XOD. Now check out the first two items. Of course, you're not obligated to do so, but it would be nice to like the video, subscribe to the channel and share. And we are done. In both videos, I only showed you a little of what XOD is capable of. For more information, you can read the book I wrote about XOD. You will find the URL at the video description. Now, we're taking a break from XOD, but its tutorial will come back with more examples in ASP.NET, Android, and Linux. The next video will be about another project of mine. I like XOD, which I designed for software developers. This one will be useful for a larger audience. Thanks for watching.